Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the PharSide Pholios. We are celebrating Audiobook Month and Rainbow Book Month as we celebrate and are jamming in June with a special series of amazing authors and activities as we do here on the far side. All things books, all things reading, all things writing and literature, along with our daily posts and all of the things that we do in social media. And so our special guest today is none other than R.M. Krogman. She's an epic and high fantasy author from Central United States. She is a fan of nature, creative cooking, and art. She loves world building, especially defining the foods and dress of a culture, and even has a collection of recipes from Midgate. Wow. She also loves drawing scenes and characters from the books, although those sketches may never see the light of day. She has been developing the Keepers of Midgate since she was in high school. The main storyline has changed a little since then, only gaining more clarity and detail as the characters take on a life of their own. The world has grown in its depth of history, culture, and geography, spawning numerous side stories and prequels. So when she's not writing about Midgate, she's penning fairy tale retellings, which is amazing. Welcome to the Far Side, RM, or better known as Rebecca.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right, we are diving into this wonderful story that I'm reading right now, and hopefully the rest of our viewing audience who will watch this live or catch it on the replay, Marked. So what's the story behind or meaning of the title Marked?
Marked has kind of a couple meanings. It's really about a boy who lives in this society that's very, very superstitious and very judgmental, very harsh. And much like the rest of Midgate and all the other settings in my stories, it's a medieval society. They believe in luck. They believe in superstition. And so Marked kind of implies that he's been set aside and he's different. He doesn't fit in. And there's some different reasons for that. But in the end, you kind of have to decide whether maybe it's a good thing or a bad thing that he's not really fitting into this superstitious society.
Now, in the beginning of the first chapter, there's this conversation, father-son conversation that follows. It's past time for shearing again, muttered Pa. He stared at the clouds, too. Spring flies by at the speed of a charging horse. Or a gas wolf, Davy agreed, seeing the shape in the sky, its legs shifting in a nebulous trot. His father gave him a sharp glance. Don't say that, son. It's bad luck. Then his face softened and he patted Davy's arm. Why was his saying the name Gas Wolf considered bad luck?
So that's just kind of to emphasize how superstitious these people are. It's just that part of the world in the northern mountains. They tend to really believe that, say, bringing something up that might happen is going to make it happen. And so just by mentioning wolves, they're shepherds, so that they're terrified of even bringing it up because that could mean that something bad might happen. And for good luck, they'll spit to the ground and say a blessing, and they'll do all kinds of things to try and get good luck, as well as going as far as like buying magic charms and potions to try and defray bad luck. So that's where that came from.
Now, and you mentioned this in your answer that Davy's family, they're shepherds. So what danger or threat would these gas wolves have on them?
So wolves, or really any predator, would destroy their entire livelihood. Davy and his family are just kind of common peasants. They're not super rich. They live out in the mountains in the valley, and they raise sheep, sell the wool, and just kind of garden and have a really peaceful life in that area. And so everything depends on them being able to protect their family and protect each other and protect their sheep. So.
And so this story kind of opens with Davy being in kind of a moment of bliss. You're relaxing. You're just, there are butterflies resting on him, and he lies on the ground. He's looking at the clouds with the sound of the stream in the background, and then you got the mountains. What role did the setting play in kind of moving the story? And was there a particular location you had in mind as you developed the story?
Yes. I'm sure there are other places in the world that this might make readers think of, but for me, it's Glacier National Park. So I've been out there, I don't know how many times, quite a few times on family vacations, going out hiking. And so coming back around to that love for nature, I'm really inspired by being out there in those craggy mountains and those beautiful fresh flowing streams and waterfalls and the fresh air and the bright wildflowers that you find up high. And all of that is just such a gorgeous setting. And so that setting really inspired the entire kingdom of Mirat, which is where Davy lives. So he's in the mountains of Mirat, but in fact, Mirat is actually one of the major kingdoms featured in the trilogy as well.
And the image in the clouds was this gas wolf, snapping the tail of a Sherpa. Was it a prediction of something that was to come?
Yeah, it's definitely that beautiful opening, so hopeful and bright and happy. Unfortunately, it is a dark fantasy, so you can kind of guess that, maybe things aren't going to stay that way, and they don't. And that's not giving too much away. It's a dark fantasy. It's definitely, a bright light that shows how good life can be and joy. And Davy spends a lot of the book trying to find that again. So it's, yeah, I don't want to say too much.
So there are two predatory groups that are highlighted. You've got the dragons, and then you've got the wolves and so these communities seem to lie in between, and are fearful of their movements. So, which poses more of a threat, to the people in the middle? Is there, and is there a conflict that connects them, to this curse between the wolves and the dragons?
It's hard to say if one is a much larger threat than the other. These are very fearful people. They're just they worry about predators. They worry about saying the wrong thing. They worry about curses, and so for them, they just see them all as potential sources of danger. The wolves are more seasonal. They tend to come through during certain times of year. When the juvenile males get a little older, they spread out and they come through the area. You just have to be on your guard. Then they go deeper in the mountains, and then eventually they come back. The dragons are kind of omnipresent. They live high up on the ridges, and that's where their group lives. So they don't tend to come down in the valley per se, unless, maybe something is happening with them and they're actually coming towards the people. So there are a lot of other predators in the world too. I don't really mention in this story, but there are also frost bears in those mountains. And those are also just, kind of imagine like a big grizzly bear, but more white. And so there's a lot of different dangers. And these people that live here are just so afraid of bad things happening that they're kind of just scared of all of them and very judgmental of them, just assuming the worst is going to happen.
Now, Marked is a novella. So how was writing this different from anything, in this form, any different from anything you're currently writing or you've previously written?
It's a lot faster. Yeah, so Marked was actually the second novella I drafted. I have, but it was the first one I put out. I found that novellas are really great ways for me to kind of take my brain off of the really big epic fantasy, which can get a little bit overwhelming sometimes, and achieve something. I really like being able to take off, hey, I did something, I accomplished a thing. And so those novellas are kind of like my breather between bigger projects. And so really writing a novella, the other one I wrote, Mermaiden, which comes out later this fall, that was the one that actually helped me overcome writer's block, because for years and years, I'm talking decades, actually, decades, I was completely frozen on writing this whole story because I was so terrified of failure. And I finally figured out that that's what was going on in my brain. I was like, okay, I need an easy win. I need a thing that I can get done. And I wrote that novella and got it done in, that one probably took me 2 months before I'd really gotten into the role of things. And then I went ahead and drafted Liberation, which is the first book of the epic trilogy. It's right here. And then after that, I was like, whew, okay, I need a breath, need something where it doesn't take 12 months to finally be able to say I did something. And so after that, I went ahead and drafted Marked, and it took a month and I was done. So I stepped back. I was like, yeah, I should do more of these. That was fun. It was easier in certain ways. And I feel like I did something really cool. I really like it. It's tightly packaged. It's a standalone story. So, wow, this is great. I should do more of these. And so now it has escalated somewhat. So now that I have Sundering drafted, once I finish revising Sundering, I'm going to write another novella. And then I will write Schism, the third book in the trilogy, and then I'll write another novella. And those ones are all already planned out. So for sure they're coming. And I love the little extra creative outlet where I can breathe a little and get something real done that's actually a story by itself.
So between the novellas and the, this trilogy that you have going on, all of it is what is the Midgate? Is it all set in the Midgate world?
Yep.
And so what, without giving it away, do the novellas bridge?
Yes.
Yes,
many of them are very interrelated. So Marked is actually, it's a standalone prequel, but it's actually backstory on one of the side characters that you'll see again in the trilogy. And so far, he's everyone's favorite character. So, I mean, that's great, because then he shows back up again and you get to see him later as an adult and see what kind of person he's become and how the things that happen in Marked have shaped who he is as a man. So that's one example. Mermaiden is also very directly relevant to the main trilogy because it provides backstory on one of the main characters, one of the point of view characters. And through the whole first book, you kind of are, I should say, of Liberation. She's referencing something that happened when she was younger that really, really drives who she is. And then my recommended reading order is, hey, after you read Liberation, you're still wondering what the heck happened. Now read Mermaiden before you move on to the next big book, Sundering, because you'll get the story and you'll know. And so that one ties directly in just in terms of understanding one of those characters more deeply. And then the other two novellas that I have planned, one of them is, again, backstory on one of the main characters. It's an assassin. So those are fun, always fun. I love assassin stories. And I was actually thinking about writing it kind of in the style of The Lies of Locke Lamora, if you guys have read that. And I just love how they parallel what happened when he was younger with what's happening as he's older and kind of tell the stories concurrently. So I'm probably going to do something kind of like that to help you understand how this truly sociopathic assassin became the person he is, because he's a little off, right? He's had some trauma. And then the other novella is actually a side story to liberation. And there's this part where they connect with some people, and there's some battle going on, but you don't really fully understand the whys and the whats and the what happened before they were there and what happened after they left. And that's actually going to be its own story. It'll be a standalone fantasy romance, kind of inspired by Romeo and Juliet. So that'll be really fun to write too.
Well, we at the far side, and those who will be watching by replay or who will be watching us live or who are watching us live will pinpoint those notes, and we're reminded, okay, we are currently reading Marked, and then we're looking forward to the rollout of book 1, Liberation, which is set for the fall. So one of the things when writing a series that, a lot of readers talk about is how do you maintain, your consistency, with your characters, because, in some series, characters drop and fall off, and you never see them again. Or, or you don't know you don't know what happened to them. They're sort of like somehow fade into the story some kind of way, and you're left hanging wondering what happened to the character, or having a disruption in the flow between book 1 and book 2 and book 3 and book 4. So how do you maintain kind of the flow of the story and, kind of the consistency, in your characters? Because readers, we get connected, we are invested into the characters and their issues and challenges and their victories and all those wonderful things.
So you're saying you don't want another Red Wedding where I kill off half of the characters? I think a lot of it, so this is this bigger, I keep turning the wrong way based on my reflection. So this is just the first 2 books. So there's going to be a whole other book in here. This is multiple point of view in the trilogy portion. And so, yeah, there are definitely a handful of characters that you're going to get really connected to. There are 2, how do I say it? I don't want to say that out loud. Okay, let's just say in the first book, there are 5 points of view. So that's can be quite a bit, but hey, it's also spread across 776 pages or something like that. So 5. And then in the second one, you're actually going to get 2 more of side characters who have now kind of become more important. So that's really exciting for me anyways. But so in terms of consistency, yeah, it's really important to make sure that each of those characters has a complete story of their own, that they had a place where they started out, they had a growth path where they were, trying to learn something or trying to fight something about themselves that they just couldn't live, some kind of lesson, and that they reach a different place at the end. And so a huge part of that is planning. And I actually didn't know any of this stuff when I first drafted Liberation, but I've learned a lot since then. And so all of this is all laid out for every single point of view character. I have an entire scene by scene spreadsheet that indicates the path that they're following and how their plot is balanced, and making sure that I resolve any loose ends for that particular character by the end of the book. And so good planning, early planning, recognizing that you need planning. At least for me, I'm a planner, I'm a plotter. So using those tools is really helpful for me. Another big part is also just having a good editor. I have a great editor, so he also helps identify some things where maybe I'm wording things differently throughout, or things he noticed that I didn't even pick up on is that when I'm in one person's point of view, I tend to name people more formally because that's how she thinks. So if she sees a knight, she says, Sir Gilead. She says the Lord Commander Knight. She says all these titles. But when it's her husband, he's basically been raised by these guys and is with them all the time. And he just calls them Gilead. and I didn't even realize I was doing that and until he pointed it out. And he goes, "This is great. You should make sure you keep doing it this way." Okay, awesome. And then the third thing I think that helps is when I am writing those points of view, I actually tend to write from a single character's point of view as far as I can go, possibly even through the entire book. I will write all of their chapters in a row before switching to a different character, because that way I can really get into their head and adopt their vocabulary, adopt their perspective, their attitude towards things. And as you can imagine, the way that things are processed and the words that come out are very different between an assassin that's been trained to just murder people and he's super rough around the edges, to a very refined princess who was raised to be very proper.
Now, what brought you into this genre of fantasy, or even more just writing dark fantasy?
Dark specifically, it turns out that my perspective on the world is just dark. So that just came out. I have always loved fantasy, especially high fantasy and epic fantasy. I absolutely love other worlds where the author can imagine just things working a different way. What would the world look like with different animals and different plants and different technology and magic and creatures and magical races? And how would that affect the societies that develop and how they interact with each other? What kind of issues they have and all of that. I just absolutely love the worlds. And so I grew up always reading fantasy. I mean, that's always been my favorite. It continues to be my favorite. This shelf behind me is 100% fantasy. I don't have a dedicated shelf to a single genre anywhere else in my house. I love that. So it was just very natural for me to want to write it too, because I had this world in my head since I was, I think, 14. And I knew that I wanted to be in it all the time. And as far as dark fantasy, well, I didn't know that what I was writing was dark until someone told me, "Boy, your mind is dark." But in all seriousness, I think it's just, I do really like dealing with, I guess, some darker themes. I like, there's trauma in my books. There's healing. There's dealing with really tough decisions. There's justice questions. Did we do the right thing, or is this really gray and maybe it's not as black as white as we thought it was? There's broken hearts. There's gritty warfare. There's races. There's blatant racism and blatant sexism, classism in my books. And it's just such an interesting way to kind of look at some of those themes in a setting that can blow your mind.
Now, you say that creativity thrives on caffeine in books. So how much caffeine was consumed in the course of this project, and what were you reading before or during the process of writing this particular novella?
Well, I can't add it all up, but I can tell you that I drink about 6 shots of espresso every day, right when I get up. People tell me that's a lot. I don't know, but it works. That's what I'm drinking right now. So I just enjoy my morning routine. I get up pretty early to write because the world is quiet and you're not getting harassed by emails, you're not getting phone calls, the world is just quiet, and I love that part of the day. So I get up early, I make my coffee, and I sit down and I write for a couple hours before work every day. So I drank a lot of coffee during the course of all this work. Not sure how much, but it's a lot of coffee beans. And as far as what I'm reading, Been reading a lot of books. Obviously, this has taken a couple years, so I've read a lot of books in that time. But the one that I just finished was Stephen Erickson's Gardens of the Moon. So I wanted to see if Malazan was a series that I wanted to keep reading. And it is, by the way. It was really good. Really complicated, though. So I'm going to have to hit all those other books sometime in the next year. And then I just started one, Terry Goodkind, Wizard's First Rule, which is a classic. So just started that, and I'm really excited about it. And then while I'm reading some of those classics, I guess you could call them, I'm also usually reading an indie book or two, indie fantasy, of course, because I don't stray very far from that. Yeah, I just try and keep something on the shelf all the time, and it's usually in the same genre as what I'm writing in.
Okay, so are there any other genres that you think that you might explore in the future, or is fantasy, this is, you carved out your niche?
I definitely love fantasy. I'll stick with fantasy, but specific subgenres, I think I could tell some slightly different stories. Like I was mentioning, the one is going to be a fantasy romance. It won't be super spicy because that's just not really my style, but it will be much more focused on the romance that blossoms from these two people that are not meant to be together. And that'll be different than what most of my other writing is, because most of my other writing, it has romantic subplot, but it's not the main focus of the story.
Okay, so you've got a full year of releases. I mean, book one, Liberation, is coming out around September. Dear Maiden sometime in the fall. So how do you manage your time and the pace of your writing to keep up with the demands of deadlines and expectations of the publishing process?
Well, I think it helped a lot that I delayed the kickoff of all of this, because with Liberation, that one did take me longer to draft. I had a lot more to learn in terms of just organizing the plot the way I really wanted it, and then taking a really good look at it for developmental editing, finding the professionals to work with to do cover art and all that. That took longer than it is taking for the other books, because now I kind of have all that stuff figured out. So my timeline so far is it takes me about 10 months to write a 250,000 word book. So sorry if that is confusing. So that'd be like this big. So like 800 pages, 750 pages, somewhere around there. That takes me about 10 months to draft. And then maybe a month to really take a step back and evaluate it hard and critique. Did I follow my plan, or did I get a little too distracted by this one thing, or do I need to add a little bit? And then it takes me only maybe 3 to 4 months to edit and revise. So I think, given where my different projects are right now, this second book, Sundering, this one will be edited by the end of the year, and I'm planning on publishing it in winter, so maybe February or March, somewhere around there, 2024. That work, all the editing work for it, will take most of my time this coming fall, in addition to just the book launches. And so I won't really be able to start drafting Schism until next year. So I expect that I'll have that done by 2025, and I'll be able to launch the third book in 2025.
Okay. So if you're just now tuning in, we are with Rebecca Krogman, who is the author of Marked, and she's got a whole trilogy that is forthcoming, with Liberation being released in September. And so this novella ties in with her Midgate series. So you definitely want to take a look out for that. What is something that you hope that readers will take away from Marked?
From Marked, I think that it's kind of kind of a sad story, but it's, in the end, I think the reader should really be able to think hard about fitting into society and maybe recognizing when maybe that's not the best thing for you. Standing out, being marked, being different is okay. And I guess that's probably the biggest takeaway that I hope people find. I also just hope that they connect with it. It's a really emotional story. At least I think it is. I've had a couple other readers say, that it made them cry in a couple different parts. And so I just want people to really feel for the struggles that Davy goes through. And I think that we go through a lot of struggles like that too, especially with fitting in and feeling unloved and feeling like you don't deserve love. And I think that's just really where I want to connect with readers. So hopefully when you read it, you'll feel that and you'll enjoy it and you'll connect with it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your work with us on this afternoon. How can our viewers purchase this book and connect with you on social media?
Sure. So it's actually free to download if you join my author newsletter. So you can just have it. I think that, with these big giant books, it's such an investment of time and energy and money. And so I don't want you to jump into those not really knowing what you're going to get. So I'm just giving the ebook away if you want it that on your phone or on your Kindle. And you can get that at my website, rmkrogman.com. And if you want a physical copy, it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's on a couple other places in the UK and Australia. Again, they're all linked on my website. So if you just go there to the shop, it's been loading a little slow, but they link to all those bookstores that you can find them on. And so you can buy it if you want, but you can also just have it. And I hope you enjoy it. And if you love it, then stick around and Liberation's going to be out on September 5. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and all the other things.
Yeah. And also for our avid readers, we also remind our avid readers, be sure to post some comments on your read on their Amazon, give it a review. So give the book a review and help the authors out by giving some positive feedback and reviews. Tweet the author, send a direct message to tell your author that you love the book, or if any questions you might have. Maybe not too deep a question, but connect to the authors. I'm sure that Rebecca would appreciate your likes, your feedback, your thoughts and insight, and follow her on her social media platforms. She's on Facebook and she's on Instagram, and she's got an amazing website, so you can keep up, sign up for our newsletter so you can keep up with what she is doing. So we, for our viewers, and those who will watch us by replay, I'd like to thank my guest, Rebecca Krogman, for spending this time this afternoon with us. And we wish you continued success with Mark and all of the wonderful projects to come as the trilogy unfolds. So for our readers and our listeners and viewers and all of those who connect to the PharSide Co-Ed Book Club, make sure you're following and stay tuned to our book Facebook page for more author interviews and posts as we celebrate Audiobook and Rainbow Book Month during the month of June, because we're totally jamming with our reading in June. And so until next time, many roots, many voices are a part of the infinite story. So plant your seed. Have a great and wonderful day.
Thank you.